Welcome everyone to the July Focus series. In today's session, we're talking about enabling conversations on legal entities. And this was a suggestion from you that came up in our last focus series. So thank you for sharing that. And I wanted to start by just talking a little bit of what do we mean when we say enabling conversations on legal entities. So these are your clients that are business owners or, have trusts, or multiple businesses with multiple business partners and multiple trusts. And the first thing that comes to mind is that it's rather complex. And today we want to show how you can use Asset Map to take that complexity and really make it simple, visual, and easy for clients to understand so that we can open up and enable those conversations. So the first thing we're talking about is, often these clients talk about or think about asset location. What is in my name versus what sits in the trust versus what sits in the business, and how does that structure impact, my financial planning, my family's, and my overall plan. But with Asset Map, we can, tend to take that conversation to the next level. And that, often we know a client has a business. We may even know the value, of that business for the client. But we can go into that next layer and unpack what sits inside the business, what sits inside the trust. And by doing that, often it highlights opportunities, but also identifies risks that maybe the client wasn't aware of that we can then structure and mitigate against. It also expands the conversation. We're not just looking at the clients and their family, but also, what sits inside those different entities. And most importantly, how do they connect with each other? What are the links between those individuals and those entities? But the key point, it's about providing and creating clarity for the client. How do we take that complexity and really make it simple and visual so that clients can easily understand and we're all on the same page with where the client is, what that structure looks like, and how we can take a step forward. So today I'm going to take you through a couple of examples where we're going to share some recently released features in Asset Map, but also some existing features, and just highlight how you can use that to depict and illustrate this for clients and enable those conversations. So I'm going to jump in to our first example. Go and just share. Now, I'm starting on this relationships tab. And you will have seen that we've done quite a lot of enhancement on this specific tab. We've got it in list and visual form now, and I'm going to talk through a bit of both. But let's talk a little bit about this particular client. So here we can see under the members, there's lots of individuals that are connected to this household. We've got Ben, and Ben is married to Sally. They've got 2 adult children, a son and a daughter. Their daughter has also got a child and married. They've got a couple of business partners that they, have in their businesses with them. And they've got a trust and 2 companies. We've also added some documents, which I'll talk to you a little bit more in a bit when we get into legal documents, but you can see, I can also see those here in the list form as well. So the first thing you might be thinking is, how are these individuals connected? Imagine a year later, can we remember who's who in this family and how they're linked to the business, to the trust? And that's why I want to show how we can visually depict that. Sorry, Benny, yes?
I was just thinking, I wonder how many people are nodding off because it is confusing. It's like so hard to keep track of, and you're talking about this person, and I was thinking about like Jessica's son. Is that like the grand anyway? It is
Yeah.
stuff for us to keep focused on what it is. So imagine now with clients.
With clients, exactly. And using the visual relationship map, and I've created 2 for this client to just show how we can take something that looks like this in this list form and just depict it visually for the client. And then I'll go through how we can create relationship maps, or how you can create relationship maps for your clients. So the first one you're going to see here, there we go, is a relationship map on the structure. So immediately I've created one for the entities. And here we can see Ben sits at the top. He's the primary client. I can see that he is the founder and trustee of the Smith Family Trust. I can see Kelly is the business partner, as well as Jack is a business partner. And I can show on this relationship map how they are, what their shareholding is in each of the businesses. So here we can see that actually Ben doesn't own the business directly, but rather through the family trust is a 50% shareholder of company A, and Kelly, the business partner, is a 50% shareholder of company A. Similarly, when we look at company B, I can see that the trust is a 60% shareholder and Jack, the business partner, is a 40% shareholder. So immediately you can see how by creating these visuals, I can take that detail that Benny was saying, like who's who I'm already lost in this process, and just visually depict it in a way that opens up conversation. And I can create
So to
multiple.
interrupt.
Yes, go, really go.
Isn't that just lovely? It looks so much better. It's so much more engaging to see it like that.
100%. And I can flip through to create different relationship maps. So in this case, I wanted to show an entity view to understand how the entities are linked to each other, who the owners were, what's sitting under the trust versus the individual. But I also want to have a view of the family. So if I flip over to the family and the trust, the second visual that I've created, now I can have a look at how they all link to the trust. Who are the different role players? So here I can see Ben and Sally are both trustees of the trust, and I've put in a text box to say that Ben was the founder. I can also depict who the beneficiaries of the trust are. So it's both of their children as well as their grandchild here, Joshua. And we can see Jessica's spouse here. Now, the key thing about depicting it like this is that immediately you can start to think things are going to come up for us as the planner, but also things are going to come up for the client as well. Immediately, I'm looking here and thinking, is there an independent trustee? And relationship maps is a great way where I could just add a text box and simply put a question in here. Is there an independent trustee? Question mark, just to highlight and open up that conversation with the client. So you can use relationship maps not only to visually depict the structure and, show that to a client, but to make sure we're understanding the client correctly. Is this the structure? What are the questions that are coming up for us? What are the questions coming up for the client? Are there, risks or opportunities in which we can structure it better or make changes? It's also a great way of bringing in other specialists, showing this to the accountant, the attorney, the tax specialist, if need be, to have a conversation around, are we all on the same page? Is this what the structure is? And how do we enhance that? Now, how do you create? Sorry, Benny, you go.
No, sorry, I just want to catch you before you move on to the next page.
No problem. Okay, so before I move on, what I was going to add now, Benny, is just how do you create it? So I want to just talk through a little bit about
That
how
is
do
a
you
question.
build a
That is a
relationship.
question,
Okay,
and there
how
are
do you
new
create it?
options there. So cool.
Yes, so the first thing, if I want to create a new one, I'll select Add New. And it'll start off by giving me just the family members in a sort of hierarchy. So you'll have your primary client and spouse. Then if there were parents were added, they'll be above that. If there's children, they'll sit below that, and then grandchildren below that as well. But this is completely customizable. So if I wanted to sort of remove somebody from the picture, I can simply click on them and press delete on my keyboard. It's not going to delete the member. It's just going to move them off the picture onto this row at the bottom where I can at any point in time add them back on. You can also move individuals around, so I can put them exactly where I want to show them on the picture depending on the conversation I want to have. And I can draw lines connecting individuals by clicking on these little white circles that you see on the individuals. It'll give me a cross, and I can draw a line connecting it to any other individual. I can also add text boxes by just clicking at the bottom here, add text, and then I can move that around and add in any text that I want to add to depict a role or just to ask a question. The other thing you can do from here is I can add members and I can add entities, creating the picture of who are all the relationships in the family. So before where you added it in asset map or under members, you can actually add it straight from here into relationship map. It'll be on here, but it'll also show up on the map. The second thing I want to show you is if I click on edit on any of these individuals, you'll see the relationship to display. I can put any text in here and that will replace here where it says spouse. I could put, wife or whatever words that I want to use to depict that here on the map as well. I can also add entities from here. So I can add businesses or trusts, and I can add professionals, the client's accountant or tax specialist or anyone else that's also working with the client. I can add from here, and I can save the map, name it and save it, and then create as many of these as I want. To add people, I just simply click on them at the bottom here and it adds them on to the picture, and then I can move them around. All right, Benny, just before I go into legal documents, did you want to add something on this page?
Yeah, just quickly, just you rush through that. Like, how do you name the map? How do you give it?
Okay, so you just click on here where it says new map, double click, and then you can name it. So
And
I'll
then
say
just make it anything there. Yeah, cool. And now how do I go back to the previous bit? Because remember there was a previous map.
So then I click on change map, and then I can flip through the different maps that I've created for the client. So I can, if you think about in that conversation with the clients, I can go through this entity picture, then I can go through my family and trust picture, and then I can go to my new picture that I've just created. So you can flip through all the different relationship maps that you've created here.
And then that clone is also interesting because that's instead of starting
Yeah,
from, like you can start from an existing
exactly.
relationship map. I just want to add
Exactly.
two things. Sorry,
Mm.
Kirsty, I know you're super excited
No,
to get to
no.
the documents because that I
No.
think is like a really important something important. But just two things. One is I just want to say you can't generate a report including a relationship map at the moment. The reason is not because it's not technically possible, is because these maps sometimes get very large. And so we're struggling to figure out how to do the like a,
But
yeah, fitting
yeah.
it to a page or two pages or something. But
Mm.
I've already seen the drafts of that coming out. So the IT team is working on in it, and so it's not a technical challenge. It's that the making the scale correct. And then the other thing I just want to say, Kirsty, is I
Mm.
think what's important, the real what are we talking about here? I think the real important thing is if you ever only going to for one client need a family tree, you're going to use a pen
Mm.
and paper. I mean, why spend time clicking through blocks here and stuff? You're going to use a pen and paper. I think what this is super useful for is where we need to have many of these conversations. So if you want to focus on the clients with trusts and you want to start fleshing out the details around the trust, and Kirsty is going to show us now how this is a great way because it's scalable and repeatable. And so think about what are those conversations, complex families, kids living overseas, business partners, other professionals, whatever those things are. This is the way to make it scalable and repeatable.
Yeah, I love that. And maybe just to mention, you can share it to Client Portal as well. So if you've given your client access to Client Portal, you can add this as a permission so they can view these different relationship maps that you've created for them on the Client Portal. And you might have seen in the last 2 weeks, there was a change on legal documents. So I wanted to show you that when you add in legal documents now, for example, here I've added in a trust deed, you'll see that there's a new tick box here that says eligible for beneficiary designation. And what that means is if I select that on a legal document, it means that I can apply that as a beneficiary on any of the financials that I've created for the client. So think about adding the will. I can say, this is the beneficiaries in terms of the will. I can select the will as the beneficiary, and then it'll show up on the beneficiary report that that particular financial is going to be treated as per the will. But it also means that I can show these documents on my relationship map. So for example, here, if I'm looking at this particular family, I can add the trust deed as this document and link it to the trust here so that from here I can click on it and I can view, all the particulars that I've put in about that trust deed. And I can also view any notes that I've added about that particular document. So this is a great enhancement just on top of showing the structure. You can also highlight where there's documents in place, like for example, shareholders agreement, buy and sell agreements, trust deeds, and link them right here to view it on your relationship map. All right. Okay, so the first step in when we're dealing with clients with lots of entities, lots of businesses and trusts is start by adding all of the people. Create a relationship maps showing how those structures are connected, how those individuals are connected, how they're connected to the business and to the trust. But next we're going to look at what does that mean in asset map? How do I show the financials that sit inside these different entities? So I'm just going to switch over here. Okay. So in this example, we've got Jack and Kyle Johnson. They're brothers and they own a business together. The business is a property business. So the first thing I want to mention here is I've added the entity right at the top of the screen so that I can expand what we know about this business. So here under the Johnson Company, you'll see that they've got 2 rental properties that they rent out. I've added, the bonds that they currently have on those properties, but also included what income and expenses are coming off in that business. On the right-hand side, we've got a discretionary investment. And the reason I put this discretionary investment and this loan account on is that often when we go to that next level of detail, these are the types of things that come up, where there's funding sitting perhaps in cash or in investment in the business, but most importantly, loan accounts. If you're adding a business for a client, I'd always just add that block with a question mark, because the amount of times it comes out that there's a loan account where either an individual owes the company funds, like in this case, or the company owes the individual funds. And obviously that's going to impact the plan. So just a great way of just adding that block and asking that question. But here, the first step is I've created the company and I've added in all the financials. But now I need to show how that business is owned. And in this case, it's owned 50-50 by Jack and Kyle. But how do I reflect that? Now, there are 2 different ways that you can reflect that in Asset Map, and I'm going to show you both. The first, in this example, if I click on the Johnson Company here, and we have a look at the detail here on the right-hand side, you'll see that I can link members. In this first example, I've chosen not to link the members. I want to keep it completely separate, what sits inside the business and what is owned by Jack and Kyle. So I haven't linked members here, and I haven't ticked assign entity ownership. So in this example, I've manually added an asset to show the shareholding and the value of the business for the individuals in the household. So here you can see I've added an asset, just call it non-retirement. I've referenced it as shareholding and put in the company name, and then put the current value of the business, showing that they own it 50-50. So in this method, when I look at Jack and Kyle, I see the asset that they own, and I can also see the loan account here that I've added for Jack. So I added as an asset to the company, but a liability under Jack because he owes the funds to the company. And now I reflect it like this. That's the one way of reflecting it. The second method is actually linking the company to those who own it. So if I go across now to this example, it's all exactly the same. The only difference here is if I click on the company, I actually selected under linked members to link it to Jack and Kyle, and I've put in the percentage ownership that they each own in the business. I've also ticked this assign entity ownership. What this does, if I link the business to the individuals, is it actually shows all of the assets and liabilities and incomes that sit under the business under these 2 individuals based on the percentage that they own of that business. So now we can see, looking at Jack and Kyle, looks a bit different. We can see the incomes that sit inside the business. We can see the expenses and the assets. But it does show it in a different color to say it's actually sitting under another entity, but we're reflecting it here because Jack and Kyle are the owners of that particular entity. And it rolls it up. So here, for example, we know there's 2 companies, but it's showing me the total and the total based on Jack's percentage ownership of the business. But I can always click on there to expand and see what are the properties that sit underneath that. So any of these items can be expanded to see what sits underneath, but it rolls it up to show in totals. Okay. So the key thing once you've added all of the individuals, all of the businesses, all of the trusts, is to just go one by one through each of those entities. What sits inside this entity, and then who owns it, and how do I want to reflect that? Do I want to reflect the assets that sit in the business under the individual, or do I want to use method 1 where I add it as an asset to reflect the ownership of the business? All right. Perfect. Then the third scenario that I want to work through is just when it comes to assurance, business assurance. So here, a very similar example. We've got John and Jack as the business owners. The company is very creatively named as the Jack and John Company. And we can see that under John, he owns 60% of the business and Jack owns 40% of the business. So the first thing I've done is I've used method number one that I showed today, and I've put in the asset showing the ownership of the business as 60% for for John and 40% for Jack. Then if we look at, what is the cover that's in place? So if we have a look in this business, we can see that there's some business financing, and because of that, they have decided to take out contingent liability cover. You'll see that it's in yellow, showing that it's owned by someone else, but it's reflecting here because it's in the event of John's death. So in the event of John's death, this policy will pay out to the company to fund that debt. So if I click on the contingent liability, you'll see here that I've added John as the life assured. It's in the event of John's death. I've put in that it's to cover debts, and this is the amount. But the key thing here is that the owner of this policy is the company, and the company is also the beneficiary of this policy. So we can select that here, and that'll reflect on the policy schedule to show what happens in the event of death. Very similar for the key person cover. We're showing, what the amount is. Again, it's on John's life, but the owner is the company and the beneficiary is also the company. Then we get to buy and sell, and this is where it sometimes gets a little bit tricky. What's amount is on whose life. So I just wanted to work through an example here. I've added a buy and sell. In this case, in the event of John's death, his share of the business equates to 6 million. So the buy and sell on his life will be for that amount. And the purpose of that is for Jack to be able to use the proceeds of that policy to purchase John's share in the business from the family or from the estate in order for Jack to then become 100% shareholder. So here, John is the life insured, but in this case, the policy owner is the business partner as well as the beneficiary. Yeah. Perfect. Right. Any questions on this one, Benny, on the assurance side?
Just quickly, one on the stacked blocks.
Okay, yes.
Is when you can you remember offhand when you generate a report?
Yes.
Does it show the stack or the summary?
So when you click on reports, you'll see here under the asset map section, you would then include here that you want to have it on either expanded or collapsed. So you can select either or and then generate the report.
Awesome.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, brilliant. Okay, so maybe just in summary, step one, add all the individuals, add the companies, add the trusts, use the relationship maps to show how all of these individuals are connected. And then in the map, decide which method you want to use. Do I want to add it as an asset, or do I want to link the companies to whoever owns it, or link the trust to who the beneficiaries are, and how do I want to reflect that? And then just go entity by entity and add it. All right. I'm going to just flip over. I want to show just one or two new things that have come out, and then we'll close up for the day. So first thing here, we've added on the household index page here, client portal. So before you'd have to go into the member to check, are they active on the portal or inactive, or how do I grant access? Now you can do it straight here from the dashboard. So I can click on client portal. I can see who's active, where something has expired or someone is inactive, and I can grant access straight from here. So you don't have to go into that member tab anymore. You can do it straight from the household tab. And I want to just mention on Client Portal, we've received a lot of feedback from you of planners, sending it out to clients, sharing Client Portal with them, adding that suggest mode, clients making those changes. So if you haven't tried it out yet, please go ahead and do that. It's been really positive feedback from clients and from planners on suggest mode. So please have a look at that, try it out, and send us your feedback. And then another new change that's coming out later today is present mode. And what that'll do is it'll be a new button that you'll have your in asset map at the top, where you'll be able to click on that. And it's just going to remove some of the detailed menu items from the side so that it's not distracting for clients. It'll expand the asset map page, almost like the F11 functionality, so clients can really see it and engage with that. And it'll give you the ability to just blank out the screen and then turn it back on again to reveal. So watch out for that enhancement coming later today. We will share more of that in the recording. Right. Then I'm just going to recap and summarize, and here we go. All right. Okay, so the key things I just want to talk about is just remembering that we want to show those legal structures, how they're connected, and expand that conversation. Most importantly, to highlight any opportunities and risks. But I think the key thing is we know it's complex. These structures are complex. They are changing all the time. There's different role players. We can really be that person that brings it all together for the client, that visually shows that, shows it to them in a way that they can understand, feel empowered, and make those decisions that move them forward. So please try relationship maps, try adding the entities, and work through that. And as always, please let us know if we can assist or work through a specific client with you.